Family, 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 family. Assets over liabilities. Assets over liabilities. Assets, something put money into your pocket. Liabilities, something take money out of your pocket. Today, Billionaire Baby
Isis on Fire.
and Billionaire Sunday. We're building bridges, not walls.
Okay. Building bridges, not walls. That's a good visual. What
Right.
is the difference between a bridge and a wall?
Well, bridge, I would say like a bridge is more like an ally. You know, when you're building bridges, you want to be able to make allies. You want to be able to network. You want to be able to negotiate deals. You know, because you want to be able to actually make bridges. And walls is something that isolates you. You know, you build a wall and, you know, you're cutting off communication. You know, you're not able to network.
Right. Because when I visualize a wall, I visualize something, just concrete from the ground up.
Right.
Where a bridge is something that passes over a body of water or something like that.
Exactly. And that's what we want to be able. See, one thing about a bridge, you can cross over and come back. You can cross over and come back. You build a wall, you can't get through. You know, a bridge builds communication. You know, once you build in a bridge, it's like you're building communication. You know, you're able to negotiate deals with different people. If you're networking, you're able to be able to negotiate with different people. If you're in business, you want to be able to build bridges. If you're whatever services that you're dealing with, you know, you never want to build walls. You ever seen a kid who built walls and he was in isolation, he was lonely. And if you was the kid that built bridges, then, you know, you was a kid who had, you know, a lot of friends, you know. So now in the business world, you know, what we try to do is we call it networking.
Right.
You know, building bridges is like networking and building allies. You know, if you was the president, you know, of the United States of America, you would want many allies, right? Because you don't want enemies.
Right.
You know, not
Networking.
saying that's what America doing, though. You know, 'cause they got a whole lot of enemies. You know.
They got a whole lot of enemies.
Yeah, they got a lot of enemies.
But they got allies.
Yeah, they got some allies. They got some powerful enemies.
But when you're networking, though, back to the networking,
Right.
you're doing it the way you're supposed to be doing it,
Right,
without
right.
the allies.
Right.
Networking also is a form of relation without the ship.
Right. I mean, yeah. Relations. Yeah, you build a relation. You build, you know. Well, one thing about relationship, yeah, it can be a relationship, you know, because if I'm having a business meeting, we have a relationship, you know. We have men, you know, whoever, you know, we're trying to negotiate. You want to have a relationship with people who you're negotiating deals with, you know. That makes it more better, you know, and
because then they have, your best interest in it too. And
well,
there's
hopefully,
a form of-
you know, but when business comes, when, you know, a lot of times when people are doing business, you know, everybody have their own interests, you know, and there's nothing wrong with having your own interests, you know, because a guy is more than likely not gonna do business with you if there's nothing for him to benefit out of. You know, a company is not gonna do business with you if you don't bring any type of value. A person's not gonna really do business with you. You know, if you're negotiating and you don't bring any value to the table, then there's no reason for you to even go to the table, because the main reason why you're going to the table is because you can bring value. You have to be able to bring value.
Well, just like your logo says, assets over liabilities, I think in life we all have to. You're either an asset or a liability. There's really no gray area.
No, there's definitely no in the middle, right? You're either asset or liability. And in life, you want to be able to be an asset. You want to be of value in every situation that you're in. And the only way that you can be of value to someone that you can show them that you are of value to them, is you have to build the bridge. Because if you build walls, it don't matter if you're of value to someone, because they would never know.
Okay, so remind them what is like, why is it not good to have walls, as you say?
Well, so if you build walls, and like I said, if you was a kid and you built walls, then you would be in isolation. You would have no friends. If you had a business and you built walls, then who would be your customers? Who would be where you get your product from? You know, things of that matter. Because if you build walls, then there's no form of communication. You're in isolation. But if you build allies, then you can get, you know where you're getting your product from. Then you're dealing with your customers. You know, that's business, and you're dealing with other men or other women in that area with, and you know what you're doing. You know, you're building relations and relationships. If you're building relationships, that is like, when you come to allies. But if you're not building relationships, then you're building walls. And if you're building walls, then you're in isolation.
Now, can a person blindly build walls and they not recognize it?
Of course.
Due to like their ways of
The
being.
characteristics of their personality. Of course, you can build, and most people, that's how they do it. They don't intentionally do it. Most people, they build walls because they don't intentionally do it. They build walls because they think that they can do it on their own. Many people think that they can do it on our own, especially with our culture. We think that we can do it on our own. I remember Jay-Z saying we'd rather have 100% of nothing than 1% of something. We'd rather have 100% of nothing that we 100% own than 1% of something. Something that's worth, maybe 100 billion, 200 billion, 100 million, whatever, and you have 1% of it, and that makes you okay. But you rather own 100% of nothing than 1% of something. And that was something that Jay-Z had said.
But that's like in the scripture, it says one part many members. And even just like a bridge, and the architecture of a bridge, if there's many parts that create that bridge to formulate it, and that shows you that you need that to build the masterpiece or the goal where you're trying to reach.
Well, the parts that you're saying of the bridge are the allies, and nobody can do it by themselves. You even have like Elon Musk. Elon Musk, he needs, from a lot of his deals, his mega deals come from a lot of investors. A lot of his mega deals come from a lot of deals that he made with the government. So even though he's the first trillionaire, but he didn't do it by himself. You have to have reaching arms. You have to have allies. You have to be able to communicate, because if you're not communicating with others, you can't do it by yourself. It's impossible.
And I have an example for that with business, as far as utilizing others, having a team.
Correct.
Like a lot of corporations and a lot of franchises, they use teams.
Correct.
When you go in their business, there's a host at the front,
right?
Or someone to answer the phone.
Right.
They have a marketing team.
Right.
But when you're a startup business, you're doing the marketing on your own. You're taking the customers. You're doing all of that. You're playing all the roles.
Right. You're putting on all the hats.
Yes, and that can get draining and exhausting. And then when you get into it, you'll see that is why franchises and corporations use that strategy, because you can't do it all on your own. In your mind, you think you can. You're like, yeah, I can do all that on my own.
Well, sometimes you have to do it on your own for some point of time, but sometimes we get caught up until we continue to keep doing, and you can't scale. You're not able to scale your business doing it all by yourself.
Right.
You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to build allies. You have to be able to build a team. And if you don't build a team, if you don't build allies, and that's the thing. If you don't build allies, then you're not able to scale your business, you know. Like I was saying about Elon Musk, you know, he had investors, you know. In order for SpaceX to go off, he had to have investors, you know, for OpenAI. In order for OpenAI to go off, he had to have investors, you know. You just can't do it all on your own, you know. You have to be able to build a team. Yeah. So let's go into what about resources? The different, yes, the different resources. You know, the different. And if you don't have a bridge, if you don't build a bridge, if you don't have any form of communication, where are your resources going to come from? Right? If you build a wall, right? Where are your resources going to come from? Like I said earlier, Elon Musk, most of his resources come from the government and investors.
Back to the bridge, building bridges and not walls.
Correct.
A bridge you can fish off of.
Yes.
So that's the resource.
Yes.
Where a wall you can't. I don't think you can fish over the wall and
no, you got to break through. You got to break through the concrete. You got to break through the concrete in order to through the wall. You got to break through the concrete. See, what the thing about the wall is, the wall isolates you. See, the bridge is what brings forth allies. The bridge is what gives you the resources, because you're able to communicate with, like if you're the president, you're able to communicate with different countries. You know, the resources that America has, like oil. You know, you have the oil. You have over in China they have the steel. You know, in different places we have different things. You know,
so resources are necessities.
Resources are necessities to the universe. Necessities are most definitely for me and for you, because if you don't have any resources, you're not able to get where you're trying to go. You know, there's nowhere in the world Elon Musk could be a trillionaire if he didn't have any resources. You know, you're not going to be able to go where you want to go if you don't have any resources. You know, and that's the reason why we have to build allies. You know, so when you build a wall, you know, and how do you build a wall? You build a wall through egos. You know, when you have an ego, you know, when you're thinking that you can do everything yourself, you know.
Sometimes it's a safety strategy.
Well, I mean, you know, no risk, no reward. You know, I mean, you can play it safe all the way till you're 90, and you'll be the same. You know, you'll be the same person all the way till you get there. You know, you can play it safe, but no risk, no reward. You know, and that's just the way it is. If you don't take any risk, you know, you don't get no reward. You know, if you play it safe, playing it safe will bring you forth a mediocre life. You know?
I was thinking that in my head just now, like you can only get so far
by playing it safe, right? No risk, no reward. Not saying that you're going to be what they call it, like you're going to be suicidal or you're going to, you know, go off on the deep end, but you have to take some form of risk, and you have to be, you really, really, really have to believe in yourself. What I mean by that, sometimes you have to be delusional. Sometimes you have to speak to people, and people think that you're insane. Like, who he think he is, you know? And I know that things that I speak about, and things that I talk about, and I talk so casually about it, you know, and some people may feel that I am delusional, because in order to be great, in order to bring the best out of you, you know, you can't be mediocre. You know, you have to have a vision, and you have to have goals. And one thing about it, your goals, your vision, everybody's not going to see it. Your goals is not, my goals is not Ice's goal. My vision is not Ice's vision. I can get her to see my vision, and if she agrees, we can come on and we can build together.
Collaborate.
Yes, and that's how we build allies, right? But the average person is not going to see your vision, not going to see your goals, not going to see your dreams. If you take a kid we all remember this when we were young. You know, let's go back to maybe elementary school, maybe like kindergarten, when everybody wanted to be a fireman, people wanted to be a doctor, wanted to be a lawyer. We had no, it wasn't the same vision because you might want to be a lawyer. I might have wanted to be a doctor. You know, our other friend might want to be a police officer. You know, we all wanted to be different things. I might have one homeboy who might want to be a lawyer like me. You know what I mean? Or want to be a police. You know, or want to be a nurse. But as time goes on, right, our visions and our dreams and our goals get weakened by our surroundings. You know, our social cycle development and our environmental growth, how we're socialized. You know, our social cycle development creates an environment that seems to be hard to escape. It's like, how do we escape this socialization, this social cycle development?
Like,
you know,
being burnt out or being knocked down so many times.
Well, what I'm getting at is like, yes, but when I say socialization, when I say social cycle development, it's discouraging, but it's like, what do you see? Right? So I am becoming my social cycle development and my environmental growth because of how I'm being socialized. My socialization. My socialization is what I see. So what I see, me personally, let's just speak of me. When I was about, when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, cool. I personally want to be an NFL football player. That's me, personally, right? You know, I watch football on television and look at running backs, and that's what I wanted to be. And around about 10, 11, 12, I start, chasing that dream by playing Optimus football. But then, another vision came, crack cocaine. Let's go into that area. Marijuana, things of that matter. And I started walking to the store. I see guys around the store, give me $1, $2, and start seeing guys there smoking marijuana. They're doing this, they're doing that. And eventually, that's what I wanted to do. And I actually started doing it, I wanted to smoke marijuana, I wanted to make money. I remember seeing my homeboy back in the day, he used to buy penny cookies, right? Penny cookies, get $1, go buy 100 cookies, And then after a while, like a year later, you see he got a Chevy with 50s and cuts on it with boom in it. Like, wow, how you do that with a mouthful of gold? I'm like, wow, how did he do that? And then I'm looking, and I'm like, I want to do that. Yeah, I want to do that. Because you remember, if anybody, our age, they remember, we used to say, oh, that's my car. That's my car. We always see the car and we say it's our car, right? You know what I mean? So what I'm getting at is that our socialization, our social cycle development, sometimes it socializes us and it takes us into a different route. So we were so innocent as a child, and then our socialization just changes everything, and not everyone. Right, but not everyone, because if you take 10 kids, out of the hood, let's say it's like a 20% success ratio, especially in my area. 8 of them, eight's gonna, whatever, if you want to call it a failure, whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean? Or you want to call it just can't get it right at that moment, because I had to go through what I had to go through in order to get to where I'm at today. And I heard this saying, the hardest thing to change is your old habits. The hardest thing to change is relearning the things that you have learned. And we learned a lot of bad habits, and the hardest thing to do is unlearn them.
Unlearn them? Not just make a decision and cut it off.
Well, I mean, if it's something that you have been doing for years, it's and then we go into the education system. You got to remember that they're teaching you in the education system, how to become a worker, right? Not how to become an entrepreneur, not how to become a boss. They teach you how to be a worker. So the thing is that all these things in school you have to unlearn. You have to unlearn because now you're trying to build a future for yourself. And now, what I'm getting at too is that even the things in school that you had to unlearn, I had to unlearn the socialization and social development and environmental growth, how I was socialized into, you know, the marijuana and the crack era and these things like that. You know, I had to unlearn because it's hard to break old habits.
So with that unlearning, did you have to let go of some of the people in your network and build a new network?
Well, I mean, that's the best thing to do, you know. Yes, I did. Of course. I mean, you know, when you're dealing like that, you have to create new allies, because you have to create allies into the things that you're doing. You know, now I'm an author, you know, teaching financial literacy. So now I have to build allies in them areas, you know, the areas that I had allies in when I was coming up, you know, the same. Everybody's not going to make it. Everybody's not going with you, you know, no matter if they're an old friend, a good friend, the best friend, you know. Right now, when you're building allies, you're building like you said earlier, like a team. You're building like a circle, and within this circle, there have to be people who are going the same way that you're going. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes too, even though you don't need those allies and resources anymore, you hold on to them.
Of course,
like emergency, just in case.
Well, you never build a wall.
1 foot in, 1 foot out, like just in case. I need to go back to that.
No, going back. No going back. But you never build walls, you know, because building walls sometimes build enemies. You want to keep the bridge. You want to keep building bridges, but in some relationships, you may want to build a wall, because in some relationships are not worth it. You know, some relationships are just not worth it. You know what I mean? Old friends that may not have your best interests at heart. You know, female friends who might not have your best interests at heart. You know, it's just certain people, like the saying say, that everybody's not going where you're going. So when we're saying bridges, we're meaning like, if you're dealing with business, we meaning like keeping your resources. You're building resources. So if you're building bridges, you're being able to actually build resources. You know, you're looking for not only that you're an asset, but you're looking for others that are assets also. You know, if you have somebody in your business, if you're building bridges, you want somebody that's an asset in your business. You know, you don't want to build walls. You know, you want to continue to build bridges. You know, and if you don't build bridges, then your resources, they become limited. But there's some time that walls, you know, are necessities. They are necessary. You know, it depends on, you know, because you might not want to go back to, you know, who you used to be. Ain't no may. I'm not going back to who I used to be, you know what I mean? Because I know my past, and because I know my past, I know my future. But I'm looking towards the present and the future, not the past.
I get that.
Tell us about your architecture of your bridge.
The architecture?
Yes.
I remember taking a class like that in school.
Okay.
I remember them having us with the popsicle sticks make bridges and stuff, but I don't know much about architecture. But the way I visualize it, like I said in scripture, it says one part, many members.
Right.
So it takes, just like a car, it takes all those pieces to create one thing.
Right.
Right. That's successful.
Right.
And that's how I vision it when you said bridge.
And all them pieces are just your resources. All them pieces are just your allies. All the pieces are the things that make that bridge work. Right? But my thing is, I'm using the bridge to go over. You know what I mean? I'm using the bridge to go over. You know, and the bridge is, you know, my relationships that I'm, within whatever I'm dealing with. Right now we're dealing with financial literacy or whatever business that I'm dealing with. I'm looking to build allies and not walls.
Mm-hmm. And not just for you to go over, right?
Right.
For other people to go over it as well.
Right. Still dealing with the 4th of July. Even though this is the day after 4th of July, we still dealing with the 4th of July. And we want to, like I said, we want to build bridges, not walls. And we're going to say this here in closing. Remember, life is a process with ups and downs. Keep learning, keep building, keep believing. Your past closed, and your past doesn't have to determine your future.
Alright, y'all. Good night. Thank you for watching and joining us.
Assets over liabilities. Assets over liabilities. This is Billionaire Baby. Mind Your Business Sunday.